Welcome to Hollywood Cafe's Star of the Week. I'm your host, Amanda Blackwood. Did you know that Bing Crosby was a junior? Harry Lillis Bing Crosby Jr. was born on May 3rd of 1903. He actually lived until 1977, so he did have a nice long run of it. But he was an American singer and actor, absolutely one of my all-time favorites. And his singing career was around 50 years long, and more than 1 billion records of his have sold worldwide. He's known for creating the style of music that Perry Como, Frank Sinatra, Dean Martin, Elvis Presley, John Lennon all would later copy. But he once said that he was inspired by Al Jolson. He sang White Christmas, and it became the best-selling record of all time. Irving Berlin wrote the song. And in 1962, Crosby became the first person ever to receive the Grammy Lifetime Achievement Award. Bing Crosby won the Academy Award for Best Actor in a Leading Role for his role in Going My Way. Crosby was a Roman Catholic, and he died of a heart attack in Madrid, Spain. Bing Crosby's first son is named Gary Crosby. He named him after his friend and fellow Paramount contractee, Gary Cooper. In his lifetime, Bing Crosby had 107 acting credits, 9 as a producer, and 388 soundtrack credits. He was 5'7.5" tall, which isn't huge, but respectable for the time. When he married his first wife, who was actress and singer Dixie Lee in 1930, her fame at that time was far greater than his. She was way more famous. One headline actually read, "Well-known Fox movie star marries Bing Crosby." Dixie eventually retired to raise their 4 sons. He later on married Catherine Grant in October 1957 and remained married to her until his death in October of 77, just 10 days shy of their 20-year wedding anniversary. Those two had 3 children together, though Bing had 7 children in total in his life, 4 from his first marriage, 3 from his second. Frank Sinatra grew up listening to Bing Crosby and was heavily inspired by him to be able to pursue his own dream. The two got along famously when they met, but Bing once said, "Frank is a singer who comes along only once in a lifetime, but why did it have to come along in mine?" Bing is the most electronically recorded voice in history. One of his early inspirations was Louis Armstrong, who returned the admiration. Louis once described Bing's mellow voice as, quote, "like gold being poured out of a cup," end quote. I agree, Louis. I agree. It's no secret that Bing Crosby was follically challenged, but he hated wearing toupees. So he would purposefully look for scripts that would have outdoor scenes so he could wear a hat, or, bed scenes so he could wear a nightcap. Which, if you watch a lot of his movies, he's one of the few actors of his era that still wore a nightcap. And his second wife did TV commercials and stuff for like Minute Maid, Orange Juice, and that was because he owned a lot of stock in the company. According to ticket sales, Bing Crosby, at 1,077,900,000 tickets sold, is the 3rd most popular actor of all time, after only Clark Gable and John Wayne. He's also, according to Quigley's publishing company, International Motion Pictures Almanac, tied for second on the, quote, all-time #1 stars list with 3 other actors, Clint Eastwood, Tom Hanks, and Burt Reynolds. Bing Crosby was the #1 box office attraction for 5 years. He was beaten out by Tom Cruise, who was #1 for 7 years. Mary Carlisle worked with him in several films, and she noticed that he was self-conscious about his height, and he wore shoe lifts. Bing Crosby once told Alan Ladd how pleased he was that Alan Ladd was shorter than him at 5'5". Bing Crosby maintained that he was 5'9", but an office secretary named Nancy Briggs recalled a visit to his home when he wore slippers, and she realized he was her height, 5'7". Bing Crosby was the 20th century's very first multimedia entertainer. He was a star on radio, in movies and in chart-topping recordings. He had 38 number 1 singles, which surpassed even Elvis Presley and the Beatles. It was the first choice for Columbo, if you remember that TV show. Creator Richard Levinson and William Link wanted him to portray Columbo, the famous detective. He refused the role of Columbo, though, because he felt like it would interfere with his golf game. From the 1940s to the 1960s, he owned 15% of the Pittsburgh Pirates baseball team. His cameo in Angels in the Outfield, which was filmed in 1951, was as part owner of the team. He was nicknamed Bing after a character named Bingo in the comic strip titled Bingville Bugle. Bing Crosby sang on the radio at least once a week from 1931 to 1962. So Bing Crosby also had a somewhat famous brother. Bing is actually the older brother of the famous band leader Bob Crosby. He was also the younger brother of Everett Crosby and Edward John Crosby. He's the grandfather of somebody named Denise Crosby. If you're not familiar with who that is, Denise Crosby played Tasha Yar on Star Trek The Next Generation. I love this part so much. I love the Bing Crosby and Bob Hope films. I don't know about you. If you've never seen them, take the time to go and watch them. You will not regret it. I promise you will thank me for it. They're incredible. But he and Bob Hope appeared on stage together for the first time in December of 1932 in vaudeville. A mutual friend thought these two would really complement one another, so he introduced them. Together, they appeared in 17 feature-length films, but this is a little bit misleading. Only in the 7 road movies did they actually both appear throughout the entire film. Sometimes one or the other would just have a last-minute cameo in the other one's movie. On October 13th, 1977, which was the day before Bing Crosby's death, there was a producer named Lou Grade who announced that he was reuniting Bing Crosby, Bob Hope, and Dorothy Lamour on screen for the film Road to the Fountain of Youth. It was ending several years of speculation as to whether or not the trio would reunite professionally or not. On the day of his death, he played a full 18 holes of golf where he scored a respectable 85 and won the match. Walking off the 18th green of the golf course in a suburban of Madrid, Spain, he suffered a massive heart attack. His last words were reported as, quote, "That was a great game of golf, fellas," end quote. He left behind a $60 million fortune and left it as an inheritance to his 7 children, but determined that they should not receive their inheritance until they were each the age of 65 years old. That's because he wanted to make sure that they stood on their own 2 feet and feared that they would get in too much trouble if they had that much money just handed over to them. I think most people would. Several of his kids didn't even make it to the age of 65. One even ended his own life. Many people seem to be upset about his age stipulation in the will, but his children would be set from the age of retirement on. They would understand the value of a dollar. They would know what hard work was. They weren't ever entitled to the money to begin with just because it had been their father's. But they also each held a trust fund that was set up by their mother. It was a trickle trust, meaning that they didn't get it all at once, just a little at a time. The age of retirement was to be a lump sum final amount. Bing Crosby was interred at Holy Cross Cemetery in Culver City, California, in the Grotto section. There are a lot of stories out there about Bing Crosby. There's a lot of rumors and speculation. There's a lot of myth. There's a lot of truth. Whatever you choose to believe, or whatever you know to be true. Nobody really knows what someone was like unless they live in their shoes or in their home. Keep that in mind next time you want to judge somebody by their life or what you may have heard. Do you have a favorite actor or actress you'd like to see me doing one of these videos on? Tell me in the comments.